What happens when summer turns to fall after the slow and steady Russian gains in Ukraine's eastern Donbas region? The surprise counter-invasion in the Russian region of Kursk. Now comes back-to-back harrowing nights of bombings across Ukraine. What to expect when fall turns to winter? And what to make of reported secret talks and offers of mediation? We'll be asking our panel about last Friday's surprise visit to Kyiv by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Fall and winter will indeed follow soon. Everything can seem frozen until it's not. What will tip the balance in the days, weeks, and months ahead? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking who between Moscow and Kyiv is on the back foot. And joining us from the Ukrainian capital, France 24 correspondent Gulliver Cragg. Thanks for being with us. From Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, Eto Buzyashvili, research associate at the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab. Welcome to the show.
Greetings.
We welcome back retired General Dominique Trinquant, former head of France's military mission to the United Nations. How are you?
I'm fine.
And we welcome Russian-born, Ukraine-raised.
Yes, absolutely.
Independent journalist Cyril Amourski.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for being with us. Wherever podcasts are streamed, you can listen to the debate, you can like the debate, you can subscribe to the debate. Consecutive nights of bombings across Ukraine, this time hitting Volodymyr Zelensky's hometown of Kryvyi Rih in the center of the country, most notably. 2 killed there. Gulliver Cragg, what's the last 48 hours been like?
Well, there were these media reports that there were talks in Qatar about a possible ceasefire for both sides to stop targeting the other's electricity infrastructure, and that those allegedly had broken down due to Ukraine's incursion into Kursk. Volodymyr Zelensky today said that those two things were absolutely unrelated and the talks had gone ahead in an online format. But in any case, clearly no agreement was reached because it was Russia's biggest attack since the war began on the night from Sunday to Monday, followed by another pretty sizable one overnight last night. As you said, 2 people in Zaporizhia were killed today, and also 2 people in Kryvyi Rih. That was in a hotel that was struck, the Hotel Aurora, center of Kryvyi Rih. I've stayed, many journalists and NGO workers stay in that hotel. But of course, the main targets, once again, were the power stations, substations, parts of the electricity grid. Already, every single one of Ukraine's coal-fired thermal power plants has suffered damage due to Russian shelling. Earlier this month, I visited one. I'm not allowed to tell you where it is in Ukraine, and they asked me to film it in such a way to not reveal its location for security reasons. But I made this little report that's a sort of, here's one they ruined earlier, if you like.
Orest has worked at this power station for more than 25 years.
To see this was really hard. After the explosion, I was still thinking maybe it just hit the edge of the building. Maybe they overshot their target. Of course, you have such hopes. And when I got there, I thought it's like in a movie, Armageddon. When we cleared some of the rubble, though, we realized that some of the equipment could be repaired and other bits replaced.
Today, the plant is a hive of activity as the company races to restore at least part of it before the winter.
Ready! Now we're measuring the vibration and also checking whether the emergency button works.
It turns out there is too much vibration and more work required.
The repairs still require a huge amount of effort, but we're Ukrainian, we're strong, we shall prevail.
Outdoors, metal workers are rebuilding part of the edifice. While in the next yard, miners, whose coal is not needed until there's somewhere to burn it, have been brought in to clear the scrap metal from the part that was destroyed.
We can work anywhere, under the ground or under the sun. It's got to get done.
We've got enough people, but for security reasons, we can't have lots of people working at the same time. Repair works are in full swing. By the start of the heating season, we will already have generating capacity. We'll be putting out heat and power.
Yet Ukraine's electricity providers estimate that even in the best-case scenario, if repair works all go to plan and there are no more attacks, the power will be more often off than on this winter.
Gulliver, you're saying that was earlier this month. So when you have attacks like the ones of the last 48 hours, you get the rolling power outages while those repairs take place. It feels like a Sisyphean task.
Well, in the best case scenario, as I said, they're not going to be able to have the electricity on all of the time, by no means. In the last few days, well, since the attacks of Sunday night, there have been power cuts most of the time in my district of Kyiv anyway, and not according to any kind of timetable. What they're aiming for, the electricity providers, is to at least be able to inform people as to when they're going to have power and when they're not going to have power, and to make it work according to some kind of timetable. But since the last wave of attacks, that hasn't been possible. Of course, everyone in Ukraine is extremely worried about this winter. Those who can afford it are stocking up on, these huge batteries that you can buy, power banks, solar panels for people who live in, individual houses with roofs, and other solutions.
Cyril Amorsky, you have family in the Ukrainian capital. There was the warning ahead of last winter. This one will be worse.
This one apparently will be worse. We thought that in 2023 the situation would be absolutely dire, and in fact it was better than in 2022, because the winter of 2022 was a complete blackout for a period of time. And right now what we see is a preparation for something that we've already seen in 2022, but something even worse, because we know that right now the power grid is in a dire state. We know that Russia is targeting it every now and then. This is something that your correspondent mentioned. For example, today and after yesterday's attacks, there are no specific graphics in terms of when the electricity will come back, because for the past few weeks and past few months, Ukrainians received a list of basically hours when they would get electricity and when they wouldn't. Right now, because the situation is so bad after the attacks from yesterday, there is no specific schedule, because the electricity is right now running out of let's say in almost all of the country, the situation is really bad when it comes to electricity.
Wind back the clock to the other side of summer. Before Dominique Trinquant, it was when the NATO summit was happening, and we were talking about the fact that Ukraine was starting to get more defensive air power. How has that gone? Has it gone to script what's going on right now?
No, I think we must realize that why there are such huge attacks by Russia is also because the air defense is more effective. 20% only of the missiles and drones are achieving the aim. So that's why they are launching more and more. The fact is that Russia has not changed its strategy. On the ground, main effort in Donetsk, and we continue to advance in Donetsk, and striking all Ukraine in order to try to achieve something on the population, try to achieve something on the morale of the population. So there is no change in the Russian way of fighting war. In the Ukrainian way, they change completely. That's why there is this offensive in Kursk, surprise, now extending probably in Belgorod. And this is a major change, and Mr. Zelensky is just speaking now of a great plan for peace. Why? Because he's got a victory. 2 months ago, everybody was talking about the defeat of Ukraine. Now, people are talking about the fact that there is a possibility of victory. A small victory, certainly, but a victory. And so, that's why Ukraine has changed completely strategy, as Russia has changed nothing. Absolutely. And they are still striking like they are doing that.
Eto Buziavishvili, the Russians are feeling the pain not just on the ground, but also with increased targeting of fuel depots inside of Russia, some far from the border.
Sure. We still don't know the military significance of Ukraine's incursion into Kursk Oblast, which is the first instance of foreign troops occupying Russian territory since World War II, and we're talking about the territory size of Rome. However, Ukraine's Kursk offensive has proven that the surprise is still achievable on the modern battlefield, where we witnessed the growing significance of drones and electromagnetic surveillance. And this, of course, makes battlefield more transparent. And this transparency has made it increasingly challenging for both of the sides to gain an advantage through the element of surprise. But however, we saw that Ukrainians succeeded there. So, and Russians were caught by surprise. They were chaotic messaging starting from the day one. Whole Russian political and military elite, starting from President Putin, they had conflicting messages. They tried to decrease the importance of what was happening in Kursk. They were referring to the incursion, terrorist attack, armed provocations, the situation, events in Kursk region, to basically try to calm down the population. Russian state-controlled outlets also, of course, followed this official line, and they tried to minimize the significance of what was happening in Kursk. There was an interesting investigation by Russian outlet Meduza, which basically reported on its sources in the Kremlin that the outlets were receiving specific instructions on how to minimize the situation. And of course, the Russians are currently panic. They are seeing two things. First, that the Russian military, which number one purpose is to defend its own territory. It cannot do so. And in general, the government cannot defend its own territory from the foreign interference.
Right. And so what started out, what seemed as on August the 6th, like an incursion. In fact, it's thousands of troops that Ukraine has sent into Kursk region. It's quickly become, Gulliver Crag, the biggest invasion of Russian territory since the Second World War. Of course, this map may seem big, but on the scale of Russia, it's tiny. Still, you heard there Edo describing how state media inside of Russia is minimizing it. Do we have a clear idea of what the end game is in Kursk for the Ukrainians?
Well, I think Eto said it's an area the size of Rome. Rome's not a very big city, but it is the only, I believe, invasion of Russia since the Second World War. Symbolically, clearly, the Ukrainians feel that they've achieved something. I think that there's a lot of things that they can say that they've achieved already. And Volodymyr Zelensky in his press conference today was insisting that he feels that this operation has already been a success. It clearly showed that the Ukrainians were capable of creating a surprise. It showed that the Russians have limited military resources because they hadn't been able to really very well defend Kursk, even though it's right on the border with Ukraine. What's coming next, we really don't know. There's very much a feeling in Ukraine, or perhaps it's rather a hope, that this Kursk operation is just part of something bigger and that there is a plan going beyond that. Because if the aim was mainly just to get Russia to redeploy troops from Donbas to defend Kursk, that hasn't really happened. They've carried on attacking in Donbas with about the same tempo. Volodymyr Zelensky was trying to argue today that the tempo of Russian advances in Donbas has actually slowed, but I'm not sure there's any evidence for that. Certainly, the Ukrainian president, though, was hinting that there are other operations to come, that this is part of a bigger plan, but insisting, and you can understand why, that he had to absolutely keep that secret and that secrecy was key to everything, and therefore they would be very tight-lipped.
General Taikon, I've seen estimates, I've reported estimates of 6,000 to 10,000 troops. What can the plan be?
The plan can be first to go and attack Russia in Russia, with the support of the US, which is quite new. 2 years ago, the US was saying, don't touch the Russian ground. Now, the US are supporting Ukraine. Second part of the plan is to have cards for discussion. You are occupying Russian territory, you are occupying Ukraine territory, then we can discuss. Third part is probably also to have Russian prisoners, and there are lots of Russian prisoners, and then you will exchange with the Ukraine. And the last part, which is not a success up to now, is that with an attack in Kursk, you will envisage that the Russian will divert troops from Donbas to Kursk. In fact, it is not happening now, right now. But we will see, because the Russian system is very slow, and it is not organized at all in Kursk. And so we don't know if this will not happen in the next weeks.
Cyril Amourski, how far could the Ukrainians go? Have they taken all they're going to take?
I don't think it's about, the number of square kilometers that the Ukrainians are going to take in the Kursk region. I think that it's true that maybe Russia did not move all of its troops from the Pokrovsk area to Kursk, but still about 1/3 of the troops that are currently in the Kursk region, on the Russian side, obviously, they come from the east. They don't come from the south, for example. Yes, it's true that about half of the troops that were sent to Kursk, they come from either Russia or the north of Ukraine, so cities like Vovchansk. It's a city where they launched an incursion themselves about 3 months ago. But I think that, again, there's multiple objectives. When we talk about what is happening, there's the political objective, because the morale is way higher than it used to be in Ukraine. It's something that was mentioned by your correspondent, and it's true. Many Ukrainians think that it might be a part of a bigger plan. Maybe they will launch an operation in Belgorod. Maybe it's about, trying to find a way in these potential negotiations. But it's also, and I think this is the most important thing today, it's also the fact that the Ukrainians managed to show that the red lines do not exist. This is the main point from what I see, because before, this is something that you said already as well, the Ukrainians were not allowed to use US or Western equipment on Russian soil. Now they do, and I think that the next so-called red line is using missiles in Russian soil. So, for example, when they talk about ATACMS missiles, for example, or the French Scalp missiles that can go up to 250 kilometers within Russian soil. This is something that Ukrainians are really looking for, and they know that if they manage to get it, they can push on Russia, they can have a greater position in negotiations. And maybe last thing that I want to mention is that Ukraine today has made it clear that they do not want to negotiate, and the Russians understood that, because they say that hopes of negotiations are dead.
We'll revisit that point a little bit later on in the conversation. We should mention what's been in the news this Tuesday. We're used to seeing the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. That's on the front line. It was taken by Russia during the opening days of the full-scale invasion back in 2022. These are images from earlier this Tuesday in Kurchatov. That's where the Kursk nuclear power plant is. It's 40 kilometers from the front line. And Rafael Grossi warns there are risks.
There has been activity near here. I was informed about impact of drones. I was shown some of the remnants of those. The fact that the plant is operating make it even more serious in terms of an eventual action against it. When a plant is operating, the temperature is much higher, and if there was the case of an impact or something that could affect there would be serious consequences.
Your reaction, Dominique Trinquant, to Rafael Grossi's visit and to the words he just spoke?
Yeah, I think that he's doing his job. They are nuclear power, and they have to get inspection and see the level of danger. But there are major differences. Zaporizhia was not working. Zaporizhia is occupied by Russian soldier in Ukraine.
Absolutely.
In Kursk, there are no Ukrainian soldier close to the nuclear power plant, and it is running. So this is a danger. When it is running, and when you've got a danger weapon system close to a power plant, it is very dangerous.
So do you think he was cautioning the Ukrainians not to hit the plant, or was he cautioning the Russians to shut it down?
First, he's doing his job, seeing if there are problems. But behind that, there is probably a communication plan for the Russian, showing, what the Ukrainian will do. And of course, the Ukrainian will never do that. They will never threaten this power plant, because they know that when it was in Ukraine with the Russian, then there was a big problem. So they don't have the same problem in Kursk, in Russia.
Yeah, they don't plan on blackmailing the entire world because of a power plant existing in Kursk. They don't want to do the exact same thing as the Russians do. And also, they are very far from Kurchatov, let's be honest as well about that.
40 kilometers away, Gulliver Cragg.
Yeah, just to clarify, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant was operational when the Russians occupied it. It was shut down in September 2022. I hear on Ukrainian radio really regularly very bitter words about Rafael Grossi not having warned against the Russian attack on the Zaporizhia plant in the same way that he seems to be keen on warning against Ukraine attacking this plant in Kursk. Trying to look for any trace of him having said something similar back in 2022, and I can't find it. There's a lot of suspicion of him and his organization in Ukraine, it's worth noting.
In Kurchatov, where that plant lies, the locals keeping abreast of evacuations that are happening closer to the front line. Let's take a listen.
Sometimes it can be quite loud. The kids were initially worried, but I explained to my older daughter that we're being protected. The air defense system is activated. It means everyone's informed we're under protection. At least they will protect our city and all of
The leadership is to blame. How did they allow half of Russia to be beaten? What is this? Before this, the Ukrainians were still hitting. Putin was running around. And they keep hitting and hitting.
Okay, Edo Buziavishvili, it's not half of Russia that's being occupied by Ukraine. But your reaction listening to those people speaking on camera?
Honestly, there's a huge problem and fear in Russia that if Ukraine advances, there might be a mobilization in Russia. Putin does not want to create a situation that looks like mobilization currently, because we all remember what was happening during the 2022 mobilization in Russia. First, that Russians were running out of the country, and second, Russia was not successful in mobilizing personnel to fight in Ukraine, and they were pardoning prisoners, paying money, etc., to send people to the front lines. So what we learned in the latest days, and I think that this worries Russians a lot, is that Russia is sending conscripts, little boys, to defend the front lines of Kursk. Part of them died, part of them were captured. After August 24 prisoner exchange between Russia and Ukraine, we learned from Russian Human Rights Commissioner that all of the 115 exchanged Russian prisoners were conscripts. So what we see is currently that Kremlin is normalizing the deployment of conscripts to the front lines, and what we see in the online space is that Russians are not happy about it.
Yeah, not happy about it, Eto. How much blowback is there? We haven't seen, as some predicted, we'd see mass mobilizations of mothers and wives of soldiers, for instance.
Yeah, but we also, on the other hand, yes, there is this dissatisfaction among Russians, but on the other hand, there are not many online spaces that Russians can show this, because after the invasion of Ukraine, Russia has very promptly blocked the very popular Western platforms like Facebook, Instagram, etc. Currently, they are cracking down on YouTube. So those were the spaces where we were getting into the thinking of Russians. And currently, those kind of spaces are like shrinking. It's either Telegram or other Russian online spaces where Russians still show this dissatisfaction. I'm not sure about the physical space, though, because, of course, many people are afraid to be imprisoned, because there is a law in Russia which sends person to prison for 15 years if they spread any fakes about war in Ukraine. So this can be anything. So I guess that physical space protests are not that much expected.
At this point, you mentioned Telegram. We heard the foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, defending free speech because the boss of Telegram is currently sitting in a Paris investigating magistrate's office in custody. Eto Buziavishvili, let's take a listen to a clip from last week. Vladimir Putin making a rare visit to the Central Asian Republic of North Ossetia, where he commented on the Ukrainian incursion into Kursk region. Let's listen.
The same way we fought with terrorists previously, now we fight with those who commit crimes in Kursk region, Donbas and Zaporizhia. But the same way we achieved our goals in the fight against terrorism, we will achieve our goals in the fight against neo-Nazism. And we will certainly punish the criminals. There can be no doubt about that.
Now, Edo Buziavishvili, how does that play inside of Russia? People are agree and nod, or they don't pay attention?
I think that they are paying attention because, as I mentioned, there are very shrinking spaces where Russians still get their information and where they can express themselves. And Telegram is one of the last remaining of those that is not controlled by the Russian state. Telegram became increasingly popular, especially after the reinvasion in 2022. And of course, because it became popular among Russians, of course, the Kremlin propagandists and other actors took to Telegram to spread their disinformation and propaganda and to create this echo chamber. What we saw was that, for example, in the early days of the reinvasion, Russian Ministry of Digital Development was calling on ministries to create their official presence on Telegram. And we saw the emergence of many influential communities like war bloggers and hackers who are helping the Kremlin machine. They're mobilizing people, they're collecting money for the war. For example, the war bloggers, which emerged as one of the influential communities, currently they are shaping the conversation about the war because they can kind of go against the Kremlin official narrative. They can kind of criticize Putin, but they have also heavily criticized the defense ministry for mishandling and mismanaging the war. So this is the space. Telegram is a space where this is happening. And of course, the latest events concerning Durov's arrest caused this chaotic situation in the Russian information space.
Yeah, a chaotic situation. Cyril Amorsky, of course, Ukrainians use Telegram a lot. They communicate with it as well. And they communicate with it both in Ukrainian and in Russian.
Absolutely, absolutely. And even today, President Zelensky, during a press conference, made it clear that he has no intention on regulating Telegram. It was a question in 2022 because a lot of people thought that, the media is being used by Russian propagandists, by Russian officials, by Russian soldiers. So maybe it is infiltrated by Russian officials who check the messages of the Ukrainians. But they opted for not regulating Telegram whatsoever. There is no ban on Telegram. It was something that Budanov, so the person who is responsible for the intelligence, that said that he has no intention on doing that. But it's true. Both the Ukrainians and both the Russians use Telegram. I use it as well. Other journalists use it as well. And it's a media that is extremely important for logistics. It is a media that is extremely important for communication between soldiers. They either use Signal or Telegram, for example. And actually, I would say that Pavel Durov, before the recent events, had a pretty good reputation in Ukraine because he was seen as this father of freedom and as this person who enabled Ukrainians to talk in privacy as well.
Gulliver Cragg, your reaction to Edo's mentioning how the arrest of Telegram's founder, Pavel Durov, creates confusion in the media space.
Well, there are certainly a lot of people in Ukraine who are very against this widespread use of Telegram in the country, and particularly among politicians who apparently have all these secret Telegram chats, and that's where they do their political plotting. There's a lot of chatter about that on Ukrainian media. Volodymyr Zelensky today didn't exactly say he's got no intention of regulating it. He did say that Ukraine would fall into line with its European partners, I think, if there was some kind of need for regulation. But he doesn't seem to see any urgent need for it. And certainly, as Cyril was saying, it's hugely popular, especially among the military brigades. They post videos of their exploits on there. At night, when the sirens go off, you look at Telegram to see what is heading in your direction. You can get more details about missiles and drones that are flying around. So it's very, very widely used in Ukraine, that's for sure.
General Trinquant, the French government uses Telegram as well.
Absolutely.
Of course, but I think there are 2 points. The first point is the European regulation. As you know, there is a European regulation which is forbidding to use these crypto messages in certain way. And when justice asks, because there are drugs trafficking or something like that, you have to give the information. So there is this European regulation, and I just pointed that Europe is the only part of the world where there is this regulation. That's the first point. Second point, I'm very suspicious about the fact that he was arrested in Paris. You've got a French passport, traveling on his own aircraft, landing in Le Bourget, when he knew that there was a mandate against him. When you want to be protected in a state, that's the best way to come, because the police will wait for you at the airport, you will be arrested, and then you are protected.
Ah, interesting theory. Okay. So there's the battle of, you could say, the airwaves, but there's also the battle of the air, as we mentioned at the outset of this show. And there's the ground war. Ukraine's Air Force commander on Monday conceded that it's tough going in the eastern Donbas region, particularly around Pokrovsk, that's west of Donetsk, and that's where Russian forces continue their slow and steady advance. And Gulliver Cragg, it's been brutal the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, that map that we're showing doesn't show the full extent of it. You can't see Pokrovsk on the map, but in fact, the Russian forces have advanced quite a lot further west towards Pokrovsk, which is on near the western edge of Donetsk region. They're still 10 or perhaps a bit less than 10 kilometers away from the city, but they've been taking village after village and widening the area that they control. And as you may have heard, I was there a few days ago and made a report, people are evacuating. I think, very, very large proportion of people in Pokrovsk fear that the city is going to meet the same fate as Bakhmut or Mariupol and get very, very heavily bombarded. Soldiers I've spoken to still say that they're confident that the Russian army won't actually make it into the city, but they're kind of looking to defend Pokrovsk from the city limits on the edge of it, industrial areas there which offer better shelter than the open country further east.
Cyril Amosky, again, this is something we've been mentioning over the last 2 years regularly. Russia's aim, if it's not to take over the whole country, at least they're succeeding in reducing what they can have to rubble.
Yes, and their main objective is clearly the Donbas area, so the Luhansk region and the Donetsk region. The Luhansk region is about 99% under control of Russian forces since already more than a year. But when it comes to Donetsk, it's more complicated because bigger cities like Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, Drushkivka, and now Pokrovsk that we just talked about, they're still under Ukrainian control. And we know that since quite a few months, I would say, that the Russians decided that their priority would be the east of Ukraine. This is why today, for example, even though there is an incursion in Kursk, the Russians do respond to it. I wouldn't agree with the fact that there is no Russian response to that. But still, they continue sending massive amounts of troops and equipment to Pokrovsk because this is their main objective. They want to cut the different strategic lines, the different routes, for example, because through Pokrovsk you have a very important route that goes to the eastern front, and this is their main objective today. They want to take the city, they want to destroy it, and right now the Ukrainians are having a lot of difficulties to push back the Russians, and they are moving closer and closer. They're about 10 kilometers away from the city, but the city is still far from falling to the Russian hands.
General Taikon, when you heard Gulliver referencing the taking of Bakhmut, which was flattened, is it worth it, if you're Russia, to proceed in this manner?
I think that Russia, the strategic in the military of Russia is that when you are on a track, you maintain the effort on the track.
It costs.
And exactly, and that's the main effort is there. So they don't want to change their main effort. And I think the interesting thing now is Ukraine is doing exactly the opposite. When you fail somewhere, you try something elsewhere. And that's exactly what's happening in Kursk. And for the morale, we were talking about the morale of the Ukrainian forces, it's better to have a victory, even if it's a small victory, for the new soldier who are coming. Because now Ukraine is recruiting. There will be new soldier coming, will be trained. And when you are trained, you prefer to be involved in a victory than evolve in a defensive position, very bad for you and very difficult to maintain.
To see perspectives, exactly. Yeah.
All right, there are nonetheless, through all this fighting, and you were saying before the show how, Cyril Amosky, you think the fighting is going to get worse before it tapers off. There are back-channel talks, as proven, and Eto Buziashvili mentioned it earlier, that most recent prisoner exchange that coincided with Ukraine's Independence Day. And then there are mediation offers. Last Friday, India's Prime Minister paid a surprise visit to the Ukrainian capital. Narendra Modi, whose government makes no secret of importing discounted Russian oil, but who, after recently visiting Vladimir Putin in Moscow, offered his services to a receptive Volodymyr Zelensky.
There are countries such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, Switzerland as well, even though in a different direction. With these countries, we are discussing the second summit. I absolutely support, and I told this to the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, that I support holding the second global peace summit in India.
Culver Craig, there you heard the Ukrainian president speaking to Indian reporters a few days back. What did he have to say at the press conference today? Did he broach this issue again?
Well, I was more struck by what his chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, said. He also spoke to journalists before Volodymyr Zelensky, as the headliner, if you like, came on. And Andriy Yermak claimed that Narendra Modi had said very clearly to them that he would not accept any peace agreement that violated Ukraine's territorial integrity. So no idea of Ukraine giving up any land. I mean, if that's true, that's quite a big win for the Ukrainians to have got to say something like that. Andriy Yermak also seemed very hopeful that India would sign up to the declaration that came out of the first peace summit that they held in the beginning of the summer in Switzerland. But as far as I know, he hasn't yet.
Is it a win, just the fact that he showed up in Kyiv?
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, it shows that he's decided he doesn't want to be seen as being simply on the side of Russia. There are reasons, I believe, that India is not entirely happy with Russia, which isn't supplying weapons fast enough, which is being too friendly with China. Indians concerned about its relations with Washington, and therefore having good relations with Ukraine can be a good way to improve those. It's definitely viewed in a positive light, this visit of Narendra Modi to Kyiv.
Eto Buziavishvili, your thoughts on whether there's hope for any kind of embryonic diplomacy? We saw a report in the Washington Post at the beginning of the month that there have been back-channel discussions between the Russians and the Ukrainians.
Yeah, the Ukraine's Kursk incursion, as confirmed by Mikhailo Podolyak, was aimed at persuading Russians to enter kind of fair negotiations process when it comes to the future. And this incursion might help Ukraine in future to have stronger positions in persuading Russia. But I would say that currently what should be done is about the West, because it's the West that is drawing red lines, including in the negotiation behind the curtains. For many years, especially after the reinvasion of Ukraine, Putin has been employing this nuclear blackmail coupled with warnings of some kind of non-existent Russian red lines to deter Western support to Ukraine. And as we saw, it unfortunately worked. It worked because we saw that Western leaders delayed some important decisions to make some important decisions. However, this Kursk incursion, once again, it was showing Russians and the West that there doesn't exist any red line, and it's impossible to cross even the reddest of all the Russian red lines without sparkling the World War III, to quote my Atlantic Council colleague Peter D. So yeah, considering these factors, Kiev's allies should recognize that now is the time to ramp up military support and equip Ukraine with tools needed to victory and to make those decisions that has been deterred by Russia.
We're almost out of time, but I want to say thank you to General Tancon, who has to leave us a little bit earlier.
Okay,
so thank you for being with us. I want to pick up on that point, Cyril, with you, Cyril Namorsky. Your thoughts on who is on the back foot and who's in the stronger bargaining position?
It's complicated because for the past months before the Kursk invasion, basically things were looking pretty bad for Ukraine. Let's say the things as they are. But with the Kursk invasion, things have changed because the morale is now stronger in Ukraine, and also allies see that Ukraine can still surprise the entire world.
So now is the time for talks?
No, not yet. I think it's already... The Ukrainians have showed clearly that they do not want to negotiate on their territory. They said it before, and they said it today during the press conference. This is something that is extremely important for them, because we kept on talking about
But is
negotiations.
that posturing for a bargaining position more?
It might be, but at this point, it does seem to look like the Ukrainians are very serious about the fact that they do not want to negotiate about their borders, because this is the main point, and the Ukrainians have said in different polls, opinion polls, that yes, they do want to negotiate. About 40% of them, not a majority, about 40%, but 90% have said that they would not do it under the Russian conditions, and that they would not cede Ukrainian territories. So right now, with the Kursk invasion, I think that the Ukrainians are showing clearly that yes, we are looking for diplomatic means in terms of negotiations, something that Zelensky has said today during the conference, but we will not cede any inch of our territory. And this is the main claim of Ukraine, and this shows that whoever is going to win the elections in the US, for example, in November, the Ukrainians will stand with their main point: we will not abandon our sovereignty.
Gulliver Cragg, are you seeing daylight in that policy, and is there, or is that steadfast?
I mean, you do see opinion polls in Ukraine that show an increasing number of people seemingly willing to negotiate to end the war. I'm not sure whether or not that changed with the Kursk invasion, which, as we keep saying, really did give the Ukrainians a massive morale boost, and I think increased their confidence that a good outcome could be achieved by military means and by being crafty, as Volodymyr Zelensky put it today. But I mean, there are still just so many things that we can't predict at this stage. A huge amount of it is going to depend on this battle for Pokrovsk, how it goes. Whether or not this morale boost will last, it will really come crashing down if the Ukrainians are seen as having lost Pokrovsk as a result of having invaded Kursk region.
Eto Buziavishvili, sitting where you are in Tbilisi, where public opinion is split when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, particularly between the government and the opposition. What do people want at this point in time?
Honestly, there doesn't exist any division among people. The only division that exists about Russia-Ukraine theme is between people and the government. People have been very clear about the choice. They have been saying each year in all the polls that they want to be the part of European family, they want to be part of NATO, and they support Ukraine, and they see Russia as #1 national security threat for Georgia. I think people are very clear, and I'm talking about 70% of people and more. So the current problem and the division lies in the ruling party, which basically tries to reapproach with Russia, to build the relationships with Russia amid the Western sanctions and all the war crimes in Ukraine.
And the visit of Narendra Modi, how is that being received?
Pardon me?
The visit of Narendra Modi to Kyiv, how is that being received? Oh, we seem to have lost the connection there with Eto Buziavishvili. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'm going to say thank you to Cyril Amourski and to our correspondent,
Thank you very much.
Gulliver Cragg. Your report is also on our website, France24.com. Thanks for joining us from Kyiv. I want to thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.